Hey there, practice of the practice community. Are you ready to take your private practice to the next level? Then mark your calendars for September 16th through 19th, 2024, because Level Up Week is back and bigger than ever. Insert rocket emoji here. Join us for 4 days of live webinars, interactive panels, and exclusive resources tailored just for counselors, therapists, and private practice owners. Whether you're looking to fill your caseload, hire your first clinician, or scale your group practice, we've got you covered. This is your chance to level up while others give up. Don't miss out on this game-changing event. Register now at practiceofthepractice.com/level up and get ready to transform your practice. Remember, September 16th through 19th, Level Up Week, your ticket to practice success. Register today and let's level up together. practiceofthepractice.com/level up. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1075. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. It still is weird for me, even though it just happened back in June, to say that mouthful of 1,000 and then whatever number we're on. It's just still crazy that I've done this intro and done this podcast over 1,000 times. Well, we are here now 6 or 7 days a week, helping you build a thriving practice that you absolutely love. And I love talking to people like our guest I'm going to introduce you to in just a second, because there's so many skills that when you're starting your practice and growing your practice that you just don't realize you need. I remember when I first started my counseling practice, I couldn't get on any insurance panels. They were all closed. They didn't want more therapists on them, and now they're like wanting people on them. So I was doing this as a side gig and just thought, I'm going to open my LLC in Traverse City. I'm going to get my website going. I'm just going to pick a rate and charge people that and then figure it out as I go. And I looked at Psychology Today, and the average session rate was $80 for private pay. So I made my average session rate $70. And for a long time, I was at that $70. And I remember I think it was my grandma's funeral, or there was something going on in my family where my brother and I were in the same town, because he lived in Chicago at the time, and I lived in Kalamazoo and then up in Traverse City. And we were out, and I was like bragging that I was full. And he's like, why are you bragging about that? Like, that you have a wait list? Like, that's stupid. Why don't you just charge more? I'm like, well, that's not ethical. And he's like, okay, so one person calls, they think you're the ideal clinician. And then you say, no, I'm full. If they said, I'll pay you $500 a session, like, would you be okay with that? I'm like, oh man, that would be a hard thing to turn down. He's like, okay, so there's a money side of this as well that he challenged for me. And I am so glad I had that conversation with my brother, because that really helped me have a framework for myself on raising my rates. But Dr. Brittany McGeehan is joining us today, and Brittany is going to be talking with us all about raising rates. Brittany's a licensed psychologist and business coach for therapists. She specializes in supporting women to build healthy marriages and businesses by uncovering the subtle ways their history is playing itself out in their present. When she isn't creating generational wealth via regulated nervous systems, she's running in the backyard with her babies, playing chess with her husband, and practicing a new skill. Right now, she's learning to sing. So, Brittany, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Yes, thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you here, that we're talking money, we're talking raising rates, and all the emotional junk that comes up from that. So I want to ask you, was there a moment where it clicked for you that you either weren't charging enough, or you like had stuff from your past that was getting in the way of charging what you were worth? Or like, how did this journey of thinking about what you're worth, how did that start?
Yes. I think so. When I started in private practice, I started as an intern, and I loved the clinical skills that I learned. But being exposed to the business end, I was like, this is a little bit of a mess. And so I know I want this general framework, but I don't want to do it this way. And so I got really into learning about, okay, what goes into building a business. And if you look anywhere other than our industry, they talk all about setting your rates. and it's not personal. And what I found in this field was that it was very personal, and I felt attacked whenever I would have conversations about, I think I need to be charging like 205 as an intern toward the end of my licensure. And I also really enjoy people. I'm very extroverted. And so I just started continuing these conversations with people and getting really curious. And I'm also someone who I've done a ton of my own internal work. So in therapy, things like that. And I saw a lot of the same patterns continuing to play out. So, people pleasing, fear of rejection, all of these different things were getting in my own way. And I was in such a practice of reflecting anyway, that I recognized, like, hey, something here has to change in order to be able to live the life that I want to be living, which is not working all the time. And that really opened up for me the further I got along in my own like therapy work. I didn't want to be burying myself in work. I wanted to be going and playing. But I think the biggest catalyst for sure was having two kiddos. Like, I had my first, and the plan was to have the second relatively quickly. Um, love that version of me. And now it is definitely wild. We are two under two. But I just saw that second daycare bill coming and was like, okay, something fundamentally has to change, not this like increase $5 a year sort of mentality that I had been exposed to previously. And that was a really big motivator to actually sit down and be like, what do I actually need to be charging in order to be able to pay my bills and have time with my kiddos?
Mm. Yeah, I think all that you said and the colleague pressure sometimes and colleague shaming. I'm not sure if you experienced this, but I remember I was at the LPCs of Northern Michigan summer barbecue. This would have been, I don't know, 15 years ago. So it was early in my clinical practice days. And I think I was charging like 175 at that time. And I was at this table with all these private practitioners, and they were lamenting about insurance, this one insurance paying $71, and that we barely live above the poverty of the people we serve, and we're not in it for the money. And it was like this lowest, who can have like the most battle scars and make the least amount of money and complain the most. And for me, I just kept my mouth shut because it just was one of these like, it wasn't worth it. And it also pointed out like these people are not my people. Like I need to have people probably from other cities that have a different way of thinking about money, that money is expanding what's already happening. It's not going to turn me into a bad person, that it's going to expand what I'm doing already. Have you experienced any of that, like kind of colleague shaming or colleague pressure around money and like you're charging too much or things like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. So my current rate is $400 a session. And I actually had someone who was really, really close to me go and like dig up my rate because she really liked the process by which I pulled clients in. So I always have them apply for sessions, not just fill out a form, but I get more information. And so she had been going and looking at that, which I love. But then she confronted me and was like, I can't believe that you're charging that and you didn't tell me. And, how do you feel charging that if you cannot afford to be paying that for therapy? And what else did she say? I don't think you're going to enjoy working with people like that. And I just don't understand how that's ethical. Ethical tends to be like the biggest thing that comes up is
Mm-hmm.
ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was very grateful I had done the work around my relationship with money before I had that conversation, because it just felt very reflective of her own relationship with her own self-worth and her like business versus feeling personal. But yeah, I think people either fall in like two categories, right? It's either like they are like rock on, that's amazing, like good for you, I want to do something like that, or they are like they get very defensive, and I cannot believe you can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and I see that in the consulting world too. It's really interesting. For me, it was like a big shift to even break $1,000 an hour with consulting, and it's continued to go up from there. But it's like I had clients that signed up for a consulting package with me, and then they'd be like, you know what, I found someone that is cheaper, and they're like $200 an hour, and it's like, that's not a red flag to you that the person is charging less than what you charge for counseling? Like, shouldn't a consultant be speeding you up? And, I remember, 10 years ago, I hired Jamie Masters at $2,000 an hour. I was just like, I had never spent that kind of money on anything, but I can trace back probably $200,000 in the first 2 years to the like I think I did 6 hours with her. So I spent like 12 grand, which was insane for me at that time, and easily made 200K off of kind of what she taught me and showed me. And so it's interesting, this shift. And I think part of it, and I would love to hear, because you talk a lot about like generational wealth and mindsets, like as I meet people, like I have a friend who he started a company in high school that exploded and was a multimillionaire before he went into college. And just like seeing him shift, like his dad's a social worker, to see what he's had to do to then think differently, to have mentors around him that think like multimillionaires at a young age. What for you have you seen either in your clients or in yourself in regards to that shift of kind of the middle class way of thinking about things to how to think about wealth, how to think about paying for acceleration or paying for access? Like, just, I know there's a jumble of questions in there. Take whichever one you want. Dealer's choice.
Yeah, yes. I so I think one of the gifts that comes with being raised in whatever situation you're raised in, right? Whether we're talking about potential like family of origin trauma, or maybe just a different socioeconomic status than the one that you want to live in as an adult. If you do work on that, right? If you get curious, if you start confronting whatever it is that's in your closet, is that makes you an incredibly scrappy person. And it also, again, I think if it's done well, it makes you really, really curious. And because typically, like along that process, you are unlearning certain things and you're relearning certain things. And at least for me personally, what I found was that a lot of what I was handed growing up, and this is not any knock at the people who raised me, right? But I wanted something different. And so anything that was coming into my life, I was reading tons and tons of books about it. And the books that I was reaching for, they weren't the books that were going to teach me how to do what I was already doing, right? I was reading, Think Like a Millionaire by Rachel Rogers, things like that, right? That just really are huge paradigm shifts. And if you're in already sort of this flow of relearning and reimagining your life, it's not a stretch to just extend that to money, right? Because you're already in the game of building something different and moving forward, and probably moving several steps forward versus, because I think generationally we move forward no matter what at some point. But if you're doing it consciously, there tends to be a huge, just like a huge amount of growth in a short amount of time, right? And so it's not near as intimidating in that way.
Yeah, I think that idea of surrounding yourself with mentors, whether it's through books or podcasts or people you hire, just helps you challenge yourself to see that maybe the way that you think isn't always like normative. It's just, it may be normal for your phase of life, your class, your like what you've been trained in, but even just thinking about how someone that, I was raised here in Michigan, I live in the Midwest, the way I assume the world operates is probably vastly different than someone that was raised in Brooklyn or was raised in LA. And so even just thinking about, if I surrounded myself with, 10 friends that were from LA, I imagine over time, if I wanted to be more of an LA person, I would learn that mindset. And same sort of thing with, as you're thinking about money, it undoes and redoes different parts of our brain when we're around people or information that can help us. For you personally, what did you have to overcome when it comes to money mindsets, and how did you overcome them?
Oh gosh, so many things. I think the biggest one though, is I had to get very, very comfortable with disappointing people. Like very, very comfortable with that. I had to get comfortable with disappointing my clients, my potential clients, and the people around me, because I was socialized to be essentially a people pleaser, right? I was very, very good at being essentially submissive and not thinking about what it is that I wanted and what I needed, and being willing to assert those wants and those needs at the risk of disappointing the person who was across the table from me. And for me personally, that played out in my personal life before it ever translated into my business. And so getting very comfortable having conversations with my parents, with my siblings, with my partner, right? He and I had a period of time where we were separated and thinking about divorce, and then put our marriage, we call it our second marriage, put things back together. But that came with just a very relentless amount of, hey, this isn't working, and here's what we want to do different, and here's my role in things. And that created just such tremendous nervous system capacity that, I mean, I'm a big believer, and I say it all the time. Like, if you can face your parents and your spouse, then talking to colleagues and clients is going to be a walk in the park. Which I think
Mm.
is felt by our clients, right? If you come in feeling tremendously insecure about what it is that you're saying, then it might leave for more gray versus this is a decision that has actually been made out of love. And I might not give you all the details. You don't need all of that. But this is what I need to be living my life and meeting my needs. And what a gift that I can have that and that you can have that. From my experience, clients actually receive it the best.
Yeah, I love that what you just said about your parents, and it reminds me of a story from my own life of when I was leaving the community college. So I had this job that was one of the highest paying counseling jobs in the area. It had state pension, like golden handcuffs, totally. And I had my counseling practice going. Practice the practice was starting to take off, and when I ran the numbers, I was making more in my private practice than I was in my full time job. And my parents, my dad was a school psychologist, my mom was a school nurse. The narrative they gave me that I've said many times in this podcast was work hard and get good grades and do the best, and you'll always get hired. Which was great for most baby boomers, like that worked for their generation in a way that doesn't work really for ours. And so that narrative of, wait, you have a job at the community college that is so secure, good health insurance, why would you ever leave it? The conversations around me leaving my job at the community college to go do this private practice were mostly around kind of like, Joe, you're putting your family in jeopardy. You're gonna like potentially like your kids are gonna have bad health care. These things were like, oh my gosh, like to have those conversations with my parents, I actually ended up showing them the numbers, which I don't think I should have had to do. And I love my parents, and if they listen to this, they would know that all of this is, how it unfolded. That it was only when they actually saw the numbers that they realized, okay, this is a good opportunity, and it was their own concern for their kid to not make a dumb choice and leave a job that was really nice. But you're right that like that confrontation to say, I'm leaving my full-time secure job to go after this business. I know you don't understand it, but I think it's in the best interest of me and my family. That made it so much more freeing to then be able to say to clients, this is how much I charge, both in consulting and in counseling. Um, what are other steps like that help challenge the way that we're raised or that we think about money?
Yeah, yes. I think a really important place to start is just getting really curious about how you tend to interact in relationships, right? So, are you someone who wants to always be giving? And if so, you're going to have to learn how to ask for help. Because I think anytime we are expanding, whether it is scaling, whether it is raising your rates, at least I very much hope you are not the smartest person in the room. Right? You're going to go farther quicker if you're willing to essentially pay for someone to help you out, right? Get there. You talked about that earlier. And a lot of that, again, comes from curiosity of how you are interacting in relationships, noticing what kind of people you are surrounding yourself with. I also think about just like from a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, are you taking care of yourself? Because there's something to be said for if you want an abundance mindset, you have to be in a place to receive. And so I start with like ground zero with my clients of like, are you moving your body? Are you eating food that feels nourishing? Are you doing these things that you are preaching to your clients? And if not, then energetically something's going to be off and you're not going to be in a place to actually do these things that you want to be doing in the first place. At least that is my belief, and that's been my experience. That tends to be a really big one. Um,
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e-prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support. It's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. I'm wondering, so there's probably a bunch of people listening right now, and they're charging a regular rate. Maybe it feels high to them, maybe it's low to them. They're somewhere in the hundreds, probably. So 125 to 175. First, make the case for why they should say double their rate. I've heard you say, your rates are 400. Make the case to them as to why they should think through raising their rates and the benefits for not just $25 or $5, but like massively raising their rates.
Yeah. So for me, rates are not personal. I think it's a formula. I have a rate calculator actually that I created because I think it comes down to the numbers, right? How many clients do you want to see a week? How many clients do you really have capacity for? Not like there's 40 hours in a week, but how many actual one-to-one like direct hours do you want to be working a week? So for me, that's 5. And how many weeks a year do you want to be working? So you need to account for sick time. You need to account for time off, all of these different things. Whenever you put all of that in, and then you say, okay, here's my overhead and here's my life expenses, here's daycare, here's my kids' fruit bill. My children love blueberries. All of those things, like that dictates what you should be making. I don't believe in building a life that succumbs to, okay, I can only make X, Y, and Z amount. I also think that there is like people just show up differently when they are paying a higher rate and when they're working with a therapist who is open and not like too open, right? But like within reason of, one, if they even bring it up. Most clients I have found don't actually even question higher rates. In fact, I've always received feedback of it feels different working with you than working with the clinician I worked with before who was charging $115 because I know that I'm the second client and the last client that you're going to see today. And you sit different in the room than that other clinician did. And it's not better or worse, but I'm really matching expectation with like how I'm building everything around my business and for my clients. And so like what a gift to be like thinking about that parallel process, right? You're pulling your clients into awakening might be really dramatic, but that's how I think of it. You're pulling them into this process of kind of leveling up and hey, you can absolutely go set these boundaries, do whatever it is that they're there to learn in the first place. Because look, like I'm actually modeling it for you, right? Whenever we think about healthy reparenting and parenting in general, we hope that we are setting an example for our children. I don't think it's any different within our business.
Yeah. How do you decide how to raise your rates and how do you inform clients of that are current clients and how do you inform new clients? Like, what's that flow look like for you?
Yeah, so it's different. So I'll speak from whenever, because so I charge 400 right now, but I was charging 205 before that. So like 2 years ago. So I'll speak to that process because now it's a little bit different. So at that time, I one made the decision because I was just consistently stressed. I was consistently having to look at the bank account, and it was like something here needs to change. And I noticed I kept reaching for a certification to somehow make this better, and that wasn't what I needed. But the conversation with clients, I was really, really nervous. Oh my gosh, I was so nervous. And with my current clients, I sat and shared like a Spark Notes version of what I just shared, right? So I think it was like October or so, and I decided I was going to make the change for the new year. And I always, anytime I'm talking like anything admin, I always say, okay, we have like admin to talk to, and then we're gonna or get into, and then we're gonna jump into everything else. And so I said, I'm nervous about this conversation, but it's really important to me to be transparent with my clients. You know that. And so I've been doing the numbers and I'm going to make a big business pivot. And I want you to be able to have space to like process this. So starting in January, my rates are going to be 400 and I want you just to kind of like sit with that. So I really kind of created space for them to be able to sit. And then we revisited it actually like up until 2 sessions afterwards. And the way that I personally made that transition was I didn't drop any clients. And so I asked them, like, this is not a business pivot and I'm leaving. It is, what can you do between here and like your current rate and this new rate? Let me know. And we're going to go from there. We're going to figure it out. And over time, those clients just phased out. And I mean, now, like, honestly, rate doesn't come up a whole bunch. Like, they'll ask me, like, new clients will ask me, obviously, like, what do you charge? But so much of it is referral based. And so typically they already have an idea coming in. I'm also very upfront on my website and on the application to work with me. Like, this is my current rate. If you can't afford that, but you're interested in working with me, let me know. There's always sliding scale, although that wait list tends to be 8 months long. And we can always find you a good referral. I really take pride in the referrals that I provide for clients who can't work with me. So generally that is what it has looked like and what it looks like right now.
I love it. And I love it on your website how clear you are about who you help. I think that makes it, I imagine someone who's a client of yours and a friend says, hey, do you know anyone in this area that helps C-suite women to overcome childhood trauma to build healthier marriages? And they're like, hey, I have the person for you. She's amazing. She does exactly that, but she's expensive. There's almost, not that it's just about a status symbol to say I can afford Brittany, but it's like, you're just say like this is what she does. Like it's on her website right at the top. And then like right away, like your truth where it says, if you continue to behave like your partner's mother, he will continue to behave like a child. Like, boom, like hell yeah. Like I feel like I needed you, but for men in my previous marriage. So it's like, I would have like, and I love my therapist. He's awesome. I just got really lucky with him and I don't give him business advice because I know that he should raise his rates through the roof. But it's like when you have that level of specialty and you have that level of clearness, like that statement right there that I just read about acting like your partner's mother, he's going to act like a child. That cuts through and says, listen up, girls, like this is what we're going to do. And then that's going to attract certain people. Did you find that when your messaging became that clear, maybe there was a time when you updated your website or changed it, that coincided with your rate being able to be higher because you were even more niched in or more like cut through?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much what I work with my like coaching clients with is figuring out what is your process for your specific ideal client. I have worked so hard on my messaging and I love it. I think it's so much fun. But everything about my process is oriented to my ideal client. So I actually do, whenever I onboard a client, we have our first session, right? That's like typical, everyone does that in therapy. But also within that first month, I am doing a full like 8-hour onboarding initial intensive with that client where we start inner child work and we work on getting their history straight and really sort of putting some of the pieces together. Because for these women coming in, like time is money. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a big part of their work is learning how to get in their body, but it really helps in the sales process of being able to sit and say, okay. And I mean, even like the sales call, right? Like I sit and I say, all right, I got 20 minutes. And so here's how I usually structure this call. I already read what you're coming in for, and I feel like we're a good fit, but I want to hear from you again. We're going to spend about 10 minutes there. And then for 10 minutes, I'm going to share with you what my process looks like so you can see if that feels like a fit for you. And then we're going to reserve that last 5-10 minutes for any questions that you may have. How does that feel for you? And again, everything about that process is speaking to this woman who's coming in who tends to be no nonsense, time is money, all of it. And yeah, over the years, I got more and more clear about what I wanted to do in terms of like niching down and really integrating my story into my clinical expertise. But yeah, I imagine similar to like, I would never have an issue paying a neurosurgeon who is going to go like dink around in my brain or something like that, like bukus of money. Like, yes, please be good at what you're going to do. And I know exactly what you're going to do, versus I probably would not pay that much for just like a general practitioner or physician. I guess that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you have that onboarding and that process. Um, what would you say are maybe first steps for people who realize they don't have rates that align with their value and maybe what they could be making?
Mm. I think it would be so easy to say, figure out what you want your rate to be. But honestly, I think the very first step is like, you have to find your people, because especially in this industry, there's so much shame. There's so much judgment. There's also folks who are kind of just working for fun. So maybe they're in a dual income household and partnered makes enough money to where it's not as impactful for them. Like, you need to get out and find the therapists, the coaches, whoever it is, but the ones that are very entrepreneurial, who are interested in building something bigger and who are lit up by that. They're not doing it from a scarcity place. Because there's something to be said, right, for getting a different voice inside of your head. And it's a very different experience whenever you say, okay, I want to be charging 400, and the person across from you is like, heck yeah, you are. Like, let's do it. Absolutely. That's amazing. Of course you can do that. Versus, ooh, like, why are you going to do that? Right? Like, that's just feeding the fear. And so I think first and foremost, finding your people who are going to expand that level of awareness for you is huge.
Yeah, yeah. So awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this work in the world. There's so many resources that you put out there that are going to help people. In a second, we'll tell them about just some tools that you have that are going to help them. But the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that the only limitations they have on their business is the ones that they put there themselves.
Mm, so good. I love that. Brittany, if people want to follow you, if they want to follow your work, I know that you also have a free gift that it's your guide to raising rates like a CEO. Tell them how they can get that. Tell them where they can follow you and just learn more about you.
Yeah, yes. So all of my guides are on my Instagram. I'm on a few different platforms, but I always say like Instagram is my playground. Those are like where my friends are. So my
Mm-hmm.
handle is just at Brittany McGeehan, PhD. And honestly, that's the best way to get a hold of me. Email gets cluttered, all of that. So yeah.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Yeah, yes. Thank you so much for having me.
I love this topic because it brings out those two things that Brittany said right at the top. It brings out, is it ethical to raise our rates? Or, well done, good for you. It seems like people kind of divide into two camps. And I would love to hear more from you as to what's standing in the way of you raising your rates. You can always email me, joe@practiceofthepractice.com. Also, we have tons of conversations going on around things like this in our membership communities. And so next week, we are doing Level Up Week. That kicks off September 16th. That's also when our memberships all open up. And so if you are in solo practice and you want to just be in a community that can talk about these things, every Wednesday we have our live meetings with Next Level Practice. So you're going to want to join Next Level Practice. If you are starting a group practice launch, that has a 6-month curriculum that we just recorded, I think 6 months or a year ago. And then you get a weekly meeting on Thursdays in addition to the Wednesday meeting if you want to come to it. So that's 8 meetings a month that you get as part of group practice launch. And then if you already have a group practice, we have Group Practice Boss, and that's on Tuesdays. And we also have other small group meetings and trainings in addition to that, e-courses. All those programs are around or less than $200 a month or so. So you're going to want to read more about which one's the best fit for you over at practiceofthepractice.com/level up. Those, again, open up on Monday, September 16th. So that's right around the corner. Make sure you level up now while other people give up. Also, we could not do the show without our amazing sponsors. Therapy Notes is the best electronic records out there, electronic health records. You can do your video conferencing and have it be HIPAA compliant, bill the insurances, keep track of all the finances and scheduling and all that stuff all in one platform. TherapyNotes.com is where you want to go. Use promo code Joe at checkout to get a few months for free. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.